Hi guys, welcome to another of my YouTube videos regarding metal casting. Today, 30th of July 2015, I'm going to do another metal casting. I've just taken a mould apart and I've got the sand out of it. Now this sand has to be mixed together again because some areas of the sand has been burnt. Now, what's called reconditioning the sand. Any area which is charred has to be mixed in with good sand. There is a machine to do this called a muller, but at the moment I haven't got one, so I do it by hand. You see this? This has to be crumbled up by your hand and then mixed in the sand. Once this sand is all being mixed together and it becomes like a reddy brown colour, then I know I'm good to go for the next casting. So I'll continue mixing this up and then I'll come back to you shortly in a moment. I've got to add some scrap aluminium to this furnace. I started to add a little bit, but I've got to put more in. Now this has to be just any scrap metal castings, anything that's broken up and fits neatly inside here. There has to be a slight leeway. Things mustn't be packed too tightly. And once this furnace heats up and this aluminium starts to melt and go down, more scrap aluminium will be added to the crucible, which will be seen to melt quickly once I've officially got a pool started at the bottom of the crucible of molten metal. Now as this goes down, I'll keep adding it until the crucible gets to 3/4, which is about right for the amount of volume of metal I'm going to use today for this casting. I could fill my crucible right to the top, but this is wasteful, so 3/4 is just fine for today's work. Whatever's left will be used, poured into an ingot and possibly used for something else. Here's my ingots here from the last castings. Solid aluminium billets. They can be used for various projects such as turning a pulley on a lathe or something, you know, various lathe jobs. Or they can be remelted down and used again. But they're handy to have. My ingot consists of a piece of steel plate, piece of stainless steel exhaust tube about 70mm in diameter. Just place them together like that, and the scrap aluminium is just poured into there when it's finished with to create a nice ingot. And you can use various lengths of pipe or whatever depending on how long you want your ingot to be or what size you want it to be. You can use squares to have nice square ingots or anything really. Just use your imagination. So I'll fill this crucible to the top with scrap aluminium to be melted, and I'll start the crucible up to melt after I've ran my mould up, and then we'll go from there. Right guys, sand is all nicely reconditioned. All the charred sand has been mixed together with the good sand and it sticks together like it should. Perfect. Do it again. Breaks perfectly. Now we're ready to ram up another mould with a pattern. Now this is my pattern. This is the motor end shield pattern, which is a perspex, laminated perspex pattern glued together with super glue. So we'll begin to ram this up in a second. Just want you to get a good look at my pattern. This is 2mm thick perspex glued together, machined down on the lathe, and then these fins are also made separately and glued onto the main body of the pattern to create this profile. The front end of the motor, and there's be another one the same as this for the back end of the motor. Now the inside, I could have hollowed this out and made it like that, but the thing is, when I try to do that, my sand gets left behind in the pattern when I try and withdraw the mould apart. So the best thing to do in my case is to cast this as it is and then stick it into a machine like the lathe and then bore it out. Excuse the mess. But goes in the lathe and then bored out. We'll do this in time and make a video of this. But for now, we just got this and we got to cast it. So I'll get on with it. Right, to make our mould now, we have to get our table. Just a piece of wood, flat surface. We need the bottom half of our flask, which is our drag. We lay this upside down. It must always make sure it's upside down when you lay it. So, lay it upside down. Moulding pattern as shown earlier. We place that on the flat surface here like this. So if I take away the moulding flask away for a second, you can see this thing is just placed on the flat surface like that. Moulding flask around it. Then we start to pull our sand around. We have to gently press this sand into place. Very gently, because we have a fragile pattern here and we don't want to break it. So we go all the way around. Just press it together with your fingers. So that way we make sure every bit of sand is in every knot and cranny. Right. I'm holding it in place so it doesn't move around as I do this. Just carefully push it together with your thumb or your fingers. Carefully ensuring that every bit of sand is in those ridges so that they're filled. It's a tedious task, but it's got to be done. You can see how it's going. Basically, we're modelling the sand in the shape of the pattern. To ensure we get a good mould when we withdraw the pattern out of the sand. Go over it again. Right guys, I'm happy with that. So now we get on with the rest of the mould. Just to sprinkle the sand over the top of it. Pulling off sand, because we're going to ram this down in a minute. Alright, now just a piece of scrap wood as a rammer. And we start ramming from the outside. Firmly ram that round. Then we go over it. Same again, more sand. Run round the outside again. Over the centre. What this is doing is compacting the sand down so it takes the shape of the pattern and there's no loose sand anywhere, because this is important. sand. Do it again. Bit more sand. Change our rammer for a piece of aluminium, which I've got a piece of scrap aluminium, which is, you know, anything really which is heavy. Just gently just go over it like that. Make sure sand is all filled, a little bit in that corner. Right, I'm happy with that. Now we need to take a long piece of wood, can be anything really, I just use this as it seems good. Start in that corner and just draw it down like this. This levels the sand up, so when you turn the mould over, the sand sits flat, so the mould casing flask sits flat on the work surface to ensure that you pour a level casting. Cool. Right, get this sand back in the tray. Didn't need that. Now normally what you're supposed to do, you're supposed to put the other half of the mould on the top, the other half of the flask, which is called the cope. Now I don't do that one with this because I'm not making a two-part mould. That part is ramped separately and I just cut two holes in it and then put it over it. So this is the most important part, showing the sand embedded into the mould, into the sand. Sorry, the pattern is embedded into the casting sand. And the next step is to withdraw this pattern very carefully without half of the sand coming up with it. This is the trickiest part and the worst nightmare of any metal casting. So I find the trick to deal with this one is to do a thing called wrapping. So to take a piece of steel bar like this, can be anything really. A long screwdriver, long thick screwdriver. Put this in the hole in the pattern which I've made already for the extraction and gently wrap it. The vibration from this causes the pattern to loosen up a little bit in the sand. This helps tremendously with extracting the pattern from the sand without too much of the sand coming up with the pattern. There will be some casualties as this cannot be helped, but the less the better. I think that's okay now. Now we tap it gently around, give it a nice tap. And then I got a 10mm tap, M10 tap. Now the hole inside this pattern is already being tapped so that this 10mm tap can just screw in, or you can use a 10mm bolt. Anything really, but I just use what I've got handy in the workshop. So a 10mm tap screwed in there. Now, the trickiest part is to withdraw the casting. Sorry, the pattern. What am I saying? So here goes. We have to be very delicate about this. And we have to keep going in one direction. We must never let it go back down again. Gently wobble it as it's coming up. This is the part I hate about any casting. Especially with this pattern, it's so hard to take it out of the sand without anything coming up with it. That's not too bad. You see what I mean? You get some of this that comes up. It can't be helped. But it's not too bad. I could do something with this. Any voids of aluminium that's left in between these fins will have to be filed down and made perfect, the same as the rest of the casting, as that's the only way around this problem. So that's that. Just gotta look at my mould now, see how it is, how badly it is. Any loose sand has to fall out of there. Give it a good blow. Make sure there's nothing loose that's inside it. I'm quite happy with that, it'll do the job. So the next stage now will be to ram up the top part. I'll come back to you in a minute, guys, once I've done that and got it all set up ready to pour. I decided to do this again because I wasn't happy with the first result of the first mould. So I've almost rammed up a second mould in its place. Some more sand. Sometimes it pays to try more than once to get a decent result. Again, a well rammed mould will produce a better result. Okay, straight edge, draw across to level it up. So that way when we put our flask the opposite way around, it sits flat on the work surface to ensure that we pour a level casting. Clear the deck. Okay, next try. Get our piece of steel, stick it in the centre of the pattern and gently ram, or wrap as the case may be. In all directions we wrap this to loosen it. Right, now we give that a tap with the end of the screwdriver. Then we get our 10mm tap and we screw it into our pattern, which is already threaded to accept it. And then we carefully try and withdraw the pattern from the sand, leaving behind as much sand as possible. So here it goes. We always withdraw it in an upward direction and we never push it back down again. Always up. It's a delicate operation and it's got to be done. Ah, that's much better. Only a couple of bits of sand left in the ridges. Most of it stayed behind, which is a very good sign. This is just like the casting I did the other day on the 25th of July. So the wrapping does help. It definitely helps. Tip our mould upside down. Make sure there's nothing in it. Yeah, that's looking half decent. Sorry about the interruption, I ran out of memory card space. Back again with a new card. Right, we just rammed up this mould. Withdrew the pattern out of the mould and it came out pretty decent. Only 1 or 2 casualties, but nothing too bad. And the next stage now is to ram up a top part that goes over this and then start to pull the mould. So just tidy that up and I'll be back. I almost forgot to mention, the mould's been inspected and it's clear. Now this is very important, you have to inspect your mould after you've taken the pattern out to make sure there's no debris inside it. I have an inspection lamp which I use as well, you know. It's an ordinary lamp because sometimes in the workshop you don't get too much light. So it pays to have a good look and inspect before you do any pouring to make sure there's nothing in there that can ruin your casting. You only need a tiny fleck of sand to be left behind and that will leave voids in your casting, which ruins the job. So I've inspected this, I'm happy with this now. Whatever voids do get left behind in the metal will be filed down and made perfect. So this is a good starting point. I'll get ready now to ram up the top, put the whole mould together and then pour it once I start my furnace going. Okay guys, here's our cope and our drag rammed up ready. Now we've got to cut the sprues, the runners and the risers. So we take a good look at this. We notice this one is off center. So this has to be the same in order to correspond. What we want is our flow of aluminium into the casting, into the mould. So we look at this very carefully and we see how it's supposed to be. So we would say we want a hole here. This would be probably our riser. Give it a wiggle. Take that out. Get rid of the surplus sand that's inside here. I use just a piece of pipe or anything that, you know, cuts, just to cut the sprue and the, you know, runner and the riser rather. So we do the same thing on this side here. About there. All the way down until we can feel it goes no further. Shake it round. Then out. It's all cleared. Back where it's stored. So now when I put this mould together, these should correspond. So we take our drag. Take a good look at it again, make sure there's nothing inside it. Make sure the thing is free from loose sand of any kind. Okay, happy with that. Pop that down there. Now I'll make sure this goes the right way round. It goes that way because I've written in different writing so I can tell which way it goes. Now we have to carefully make sure there's nothing loose under here. But before we can do that, I've just remembered something I almost forgot, is to cut the funnel at the top. Now we have to see which one is going to be where the metal's going to enter the mould. So we choose this one, take our teaspoon and cut all the way around. This creates like a funnel that helps the metal go down into the mould more smoothly. That will do nicely. Give it a good blow. Model it with my fingers just to make sure that there's no loose sand anywhere that can get washed into the mould as I pour. That's looking good. Again, loose sand is your enemy. So if there's any loose sand, you get rid of it. You make sure there's nothing. That's good now. Now we can put them all together. Locate these carefully into place and gently make sure they're together. Do a visual inspection of the mould to make sure there's no gaps anywhere. Alright, we're ready for the next stage, which is to start melting the aluminium and doing the pour. Back to you in a minute, guys. Alright guys, we have to talk about our flux and our degasser, because these are the things we're going to need. Now, we'll start off with the degasser. Degasser tablets, bought off eBay, EcoGas 16. Now these tablets, they're easy to handle, they break, you can just crumble them with your hand. So we take a piece that's like that, we break it, you only need a little piece. That's too much, we need slightly less. Yeah, that's about right. Pop that in our teaspoon, because that's what we're going to plunge to in our melt to take away all the air out of it in the gases when it's ready, before it's ready to pour. So we put that aside. Next is our flux. This helps the aluminium become more fluid and easy to pour. With a more fluid mixture, it makes it a better casting because the metal takes all the shape better, it goes in all the areas where it's supposed to flow. So we take our teaspoon, we take a heaped teaspoon of flux. This will be added just before the pour. So I keep these down here ready. That's our drossing flux and our degassing tablets. Degasser. Now, a runny aluminium, you know, mixture is always better than something that's hard and, you know, doesn't flow very well. Because the better the flow, the better the casting. So it's always wise to have something that degasses it and also takes away the flux that takes away the, what's its name, the impurities, as well as it makes it more easy to flow into the mould. We talk about our crucible tongs. These are long handled iron tongs, bought from a Victorian ironmonger. They're very useful for picking up the crucible from this furnace and carefully pouring it into the mould safely from a distance. So this is what we use. Nice pair of crucible tongs. They can be found on eBay. I bought a whole set of 3 different ones, but this is the one that's the most useful for picking up the crucible. Let's put that there. I have a piece of steel rod which is used for plunging the degassing agent to the bottom of the crucible just before we pour. It's also used for mixing the aluminium too, although they advise not to mix aluminium that's molten because you add more gases to it by mixing it. So This is mainly used just to plunge the degasser to the bottom for it to do its job and react before we scoop all the dross out and everything else after the flux has been added. So that's, I'll put that there. Furnace has got a long way to go at the moment. It's only on 85 degrees and it'll be ready soon, probably another 40 minutes. So I'll come back when it's ready and ready to do the pour. I'd like to mention we always have a tray underneath the mould. This is in case we have anything that flows out to the side of the mould or the mould comes apart. This contains any molten aluminium that might go astray as a precaution. Extractor's going now and the metal's melting in the furnace as I speak. In about 20 minutes it'll be ready to pour. So there it goes. Time to check the furnace now and see how it's doing. It's on 603 degrees. So here goes. Mask is on. Have a look. Oh yes, it's dropped right down. So that's my invitation to add more aluminium on the pliers. Start adding more aluminium to the crucible. That's enough for now. And let that melt. I'm back again in a minute, guys. Last of the aluminium going in now. It's on 690 degrees. So that's the last bit. Goes in no trouble now. Just let that cook. Next thing would be to add the degasser and the flux and then we're ready to pour. Right guys, the furnace is dead on 710 degrees now. So it's time to add the degasser and the flux. So here we go. Always wear your mask, it's very important. Open the furnace. Drop in our degasser. Plunge it down. I need a good degasser plunger. This is just a piece of steel I use, but it does the same job. My friend MyFootBoy has made a very good one and he's had it on a YouTube video. So if you look for that, you'll see it. This is one of these things I really need to make. See it bubbling. See it working. This drives out all the gases from my aluminium mix. This is to ensure that you don't get a casting full of pores and holes in it and defects. So this is an important process which can't be neglected. Okay, that's done its job. Next is the flux. Stir that in. This makes our aluminium lick more fluid, so it's easier to pour. it takes out all the slag, or the dross, as people like to call it. So this is the rubbish we don't need, because we don't want that in our casting. Once all that dross is scooped off, then we're ready to pour. Aluminium now is like water, so this is how we want it. So I use my crucible tongs. I get hold of the crucible very carefully and lift straight out to the furnace. Put my crucible down on a fire brick for a minute. Move my crucible tongs more further down, and then pick it up and then pour. So here we go. Line it up. In it goes. When it comes out the other end, we're done. Okay guys, the casting's been standing for 5 minutes now after it's just been poured, and this is time to see what we got. So here we go. Voila! Not bad, eh? All we have to do is just carefully move this out of the way. We don't need that half, and we can start to chip away at our sand. Get rid of this. Move that over. Down here. Very smoky, so the extractor's going, sucking up all the fumes out of the shed and away. This Petrobond sand always makes these fumes because it's the oil burning off, while green sand is better in this respect. It doesn't do this. But I have an issue with mixture of green sand, so that's why I don't use it, because I can never get the moisture content correct. I suppose I could if I really tried, but it's so much hassle, so I prefer to use this stuff, especially when you have to cast fine detail like this. Petrobond sand is very good for casting things which require fine detail. That's mad hot, so I've got to be careful here. Get me pliers. Right, let's grab hold of that and away we go. Sand just comes away out of the ridges quite easily. There'll be some of these ridges which have metal still inside them. That will have to be filed down, because as I was saying earlier, this is the problem I faced when removing the pattern from the mould. Sorry, from removing the moulding pattern from the sand. I always have a problem where some of the sand comes away with the moulding pattern. Now this can't be helped, and I've tried dozens of times. But due to me wrapping the pattern by banging it like this to vibrate it, I've had better results. So that's a good tip there. Before you take your pattern out of the sand, make sure you give it a good wrapping in various directions to loosen the pattern in the sand before you can withdraw it out. Now that's not too bad. Today's one came out reasonable. I can do something with that. an afternoon put to good use in my spare time. We'll clean it up now with some water and come back to show you the follow-up. Hold on one moment. Right guys, this is our casting we made on the 30th of July 2015. I've cleaned it up with water and it's come out quite reasonable. We have a few bits here which didn't quite come right, but these will be filed away. The main shape is there, so these bits can be milled and then filed with a machine to make them perfect, like this area here. Some of them did come out good, but as I said earlier, it's a pattern issue. We're removing the pattern from the sand. So let's compare them both together. It's our moulding pattern, and that's our finished casting nearly. See how some of the sand remains behind inside the pattern, which leaves these voids here. These areas here which are in the mould, they leave voids. Right guys, we're back again now. This is the finished motor end shield. I've cooled it down with water, cleaned it up with a brush. Just needs a bit of filing in these areas here, but most of the detail where the screws will go to keep it together, they screw the motor together, I mean, have come up fairly good. Don't know if you can see that, but it's not too bad. With such a pattern, this is very hard to get it perfect, as when I withdraw the pattern out of the sand, some of the sand comes away, which leaves voids like this in the mould. So what I have to do with this is just to file this like that. Once we get rid of that and file that level with that, the same as that, it'll be perfect. But there's not much filing to do really. It came out pretty decent. We cut the runner and the riser off, so these won't be needed. And the inside here will be bored out, hollow on the lathe, leaving the area here which will be where the bearings will go for the motor shaft, motor drive shaft. On the whole, I didn't do too bad today. Now this is very encouraging, and I know the one thing I did differently to what I do every time was to wrap the pattern in the sand. When I say the word wrap, I mean like this. This loosens the pattern apparently in the sand in such a way where you can just withdraw it out without much of the sand sticking to the pattern. There was also one other thing I did differently, which I forgot to mention also in the video, is I did not use any parting powder today. I know this sounds crazy, but that white powder you dust over your pattern before you put the sand into the moulding flask, I didn't use it. Now, this seemed to have come out better without using that. For some reason, my parting powder seems to make the sand more sticky, and it seems to stick to the pattern when it shouldn't do. So these were the two things I did differently. Hope this helps you guys out there and gives you some ideas. Many thanks for watching. Cheerio.